and we will see, particularly as we go into next week, actually. Next week, I think some more heavy and persistent rain turning up. In terms of going into September, certainly the first week of September, some more useful rain. We could see a warm spell. We often do in September, don't we? It's a sort of the added month to summer in many respects, or it has been over the last recent years. So we could well see some warm spells, but we're certainly not going to see us lurching back into prolonged drought and extreme heat that we've seen so far this summer.
Seems it never rains in Southern California. Seems I've often heard that kind of talk before.
That's Albert Hammond, who's had enough of the dry weather. But have a look at the weather map this morning. There are blotches of rain over drought-hit England. Let's talk to the number one Hammond. Not Albert Hammond, our favourite meteorologist, John Hammond. Morning, John.
Morning, Stig. Yeah, and I was woken up by rain this morning. Yeah, it didn't last long, but it was a novelty, and it smelt beautiful. The bedroom window was open. I could smell that petrol coming through the window. By the way, if you hear some barking, it's deer. I'm surrounded by deer here, Stig.
Oh, be careful.
They're quite cute. I'll take a picture and send it to you.
Do not take a selfie under any circumstances, John, and we'll be able to remain friends. So, I mean, I'm looking behind you. It still looks very dry, even though we've had a little bit of rain. Where is it raining? Where's it not raining at the minute?
Well, the shower that I had earlier on was very isolated, and it's cleared out of the way. So across most of southern England, it's still bone dry, and actually most of the UK right now it is dry. But the northern half of the country, you've had plenty of rain, and so there's no real concern there. And there'll be more rain to come later on today across these areas. For the south, another dry day, Stig. I know for South East Water, it's another headache day, as it is for their customers. One of the quotes from South East Water is that it's been the demand which has caused the shortages of water. Well, the demand is going to fall over the next few days, so they can't use that excuse as we go looking further ahead, because temperatures are falling away through this week. And that's one good thing, because there'll be less of a need for water for many consumers. But weather-wise, in terms of rain, this is going to be a slow route back to normality, Stig. We're not talking about suddenly turning on a deluge and everything going back to normal. There will be some rain. I'm pretty confident there will be some rain tonight. So as we go into the early hours of tomorrow morning, some useful rain. We're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 millimeters. Doesn't sound a lot, but it's a hell of a lot more than we've seen for the last 2 months. And then beyond that, Stig, through the sort of mid to latter part of this week, heavy downpours. Yes, they won't catch everyone, but I think the majority of us, even in the south, can expect to see some fairly heavy rain. I've heard mentions of flash flooding. That may be a little bit over the top, but the fact is the ground is so hard that if we get any heavy rain, that will just run away off the surface rather than seeping into the ground initially. But I think with time and with a fairly unsettled outlook for the next, week or 2 or 3 maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, then gradually the ground will soften and the water will start to seep in. But as I say, it's a slow road back to recovery.
I've seen a headline that bothered me, John. I wanted to ask you about that. People are throwing around phrases like September heatwave.
Yeah, I know.
Is that likely?
I was on air. I mean, there could be a heat wave in September, but at this point, I wouldn't promise that or threaten that. There's no confidence about the detail of what's going to happen in September. What I'm very confident about is the next 2 or 3 weeks, a marked change in the regime across our part of Europe. And we will see, particularly as we go into next week, actually. Next week, I think some more heavy and persistent rain turning up. In terms of going into September, certainly the first week of September, some more useful rain. We could see a warm spell. We often do in September, don't we? It's a sort of the added month to summer in many respects, or it has been over the last recent years. So we could well see some warm spells, but we're certainly not going to see us lurching back into prolonged drought and extreme heat that we've seen so far this summer.
John, we've spoken to you over the last couple of months, and you've always been a voice of despair to me, but that is music to my ears, John, so we'll leave it there on a positive note. Bless your heart. Thank you for joining us. That is John Hammond. We'll speak to him again because he's made a point to us previously, actually, which I think is interesting, which is when the rain comes, we forget about everything. It washes away the memory of the drought, literally. And therefore, all the conversation we need to have about how we use water, how we build reservoirs, how we think about a changing climate, what's it going to be like in 5 years, what's it going to be like in 10 years, we'll get focused on something else, and the carnival will move on, and all of the impetus we've had in our minds to solve the problem will just evaporate away.
Well, John has used this phrase before that stuck with me, weather whiplash. It could be that we then have loads of wet weather and stormy weather again. So I think whilst we're still living in weather extremes, maybe the conversation won't completely die away.
And we probably shouldn't, because I've become a weather bore. I hate it, because I used to have rows with my mum when I was a kid, because we used to have to watch the local news and then the weather. I was like, why do you care about the weather? And there's just something about this summer it's got me. So anyway, wherever you are in the country, it's going to be changeable, and that is a cause for many people for relief. The first person to moan about it being too cold and too rainy gets the opposite of a prize.
Okay.
Now, after weeks of hot and dry weather in the UK, there are warnings that widespread bans on car washes and private swimming pools could come into effect to combat the drought. About 27 million people in England are already living under a hosepipe ban to reduce water demand. But as the UK faces its most changeable week of weather since June, will these measures be necessary? Let's go now to Joe Wheeler, meteorologist at Square Raindrop. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
How likely do you believe it might be that these proposals come into effect, and what's the extent of them?
Well, I think there's no surprise. We're now into our 7th, almost 8th week of almost no rainfall whatsoever over parts of the south and the east. Northern and western parts have fared somewhat better in terms of rainfall, but of course that doesn't constitute a summer. So, we have experienced a summer which will pretty much go up against that of 1976. Very high temperatures. We've seen something like 30 days over 30 degrees Celsius, which is quite extraordinary. And we've seen virtually no rainfall. So to put all of this right, we're not looking at just the odd shower of rain. We're looking at some fairly significant sustained rain day after day. The kind of thing which Britain is exceptionally good at, when it gets round to it. But we've been in this blocking high for a long, long time. And what we need is some very mobile Atlantic low-pressure systems to come in and just rain on us for a long while.
We're at the end of August. Can we now assume that the chance of another heat wave this summer is over? That possibility has receded? We can put away the fans, we can put away the air conditioning units that we've all gone out to buy, some of us.
Well, I wish. I wish. I mean, depending on your house. I mean, we don't have buildings which are particularly good for warm weather. And that's why the advice, like when the heat started, was shut the curtains, shut the windows. Yeah, and try.
I've been in darkness for about 2 months.
I know, and literally, even when the temperature has dropped, and we've got this strange heat wave criteria, which simply means 3 consecutive days, so many degrees above a certain value for different parts of the country. So we've seen various parts of the country go into and out of heat wave, but even when they've gone out, they haven't gone that far away. It has been a long, hot summer. It is likely to be the hottest on record. And that heat, even though it's diminished, hasn't completely gone away. It has to be said that looking at the long-range forecast, which is like looking into a crystal ball, it's none too certain. And certainly the further out you get, the more unlikely it gets. This week is looking cooler.
I'm not going to hold you to it, Joe. Let's just say it's going to be changeable. Well, look, thank you very much for your thoughts on the hot summer. We'll keep an eye on it and return to it almost daily, as it seems to control most of our lives now.